The house changed the second Emily's car disappeared down the street, not in a loud way but in a quiet shift that Daniel Harper felt deep in his chest, as if the walls themselves had started listening, and he stood in the doorway longer than necessary, holding the keys she had forgotten, knowing it was too late to catch her, knowing this weekend alone was already beginning, the air heavy with things unsaid, the late afternoon sun sliding through the windows of their suburban home in Oregon. Touching the couch where Emily usually sat with her coffee, the dining table where they once laughed without effort, and Daniel moved slowly, almost carefully, as if sudden steps might break something fragile, his mind racing faster than his calm face showed, because for the first time in years he was alone with his thoughts and they were louder than the house itself. He poured himself a glass of water he did not drink, stared at his reflection in the kitchen window, noticing the fine lines near his eyes, the tired kindness in his face, wondering when love had become something quiet instead of something alive, and as the clock ticked he remembered the way Emily had hugged him that morning, polite but distant, a hug that felt more like habit than need, and that memory pushed him to walk through the living room where family photos lined the wall, birthdays, road trips, smiles frozen in frames, proof that love had once been easy, proof that it had been real, and he stopped in front of a picture taken 10 years ago at the coast, Emily laughing, hair wild in the wind, his arm around her waist, and his chest tightened because he still loved her deeply but feared she no longer felt the same fire, and the silence pressed harder as evening came, no television noise, no shared dinner plans, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor mowing a lawn, and Daniel realized this quiet was dangerous because it left space for regret, for questions he had avoided, for the truth that he had been present but not fully seen, loving but not expressive, safe but not brave, and as he walked toward his study his steps quickened, driven by an urge he could not fully name, a need to do something before this silence became permanent, and he opened the window to let cool air in, breathing deeply as if preparing for a long dive, thinking about all the moments he had swallowed words to keep peace, all the times he had chosen comfort over honesty, and now with Emily gone, even for just a weekend, the distance felt larger than miles, it felt emotional, like a gap that had grown slowly and quietly, and he wondered if she felt it too, if she lay awake at night wondering when they stopped talking about dreams and started only talking about plans, and the thought made his heart beat faster, because deep down he knew this weekend was not just time alone, it was a test, a chance, maybe even a warning, and as the sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the floor, Daniel stood still in the center of the room, realizing that whatever he chose to do next might change everything, because when Mom wasn't home, Dad was finally forced to face the truth he had been running from for years. Daniel closed the door to his study like he was stepping into another version of himself, the room small but heavy with memories, shelves lined with books he once promised to read, a desk marked by years of routine, and he moved quickly now, driven by a pressure inside his chest that refused to slow down, pulling open the lower drawer he rarely touched, the wood creaking as if warning him, and inside lay the quiet truth of his life, stacks of folded papers, envelopes never sealed, a worn notebook filled with uneven handwriting, all proof that he had been feeling deeply while living carefully, and he sat down without hesitation, spreading the papers across the desk, reading lines he had written years ago and forgotten, words about missing Emily even when she was in the next room, about watching her laugh with friends and realizing he no longer made her laugh that way, about nights when he lay awake wondering if being reliable was enough to be loved, and his eyes moved fast, absorbing regret, hope, fear, each sentence sharper than the last, and he remembered the moments that inspired them, Emily standing at the sink looking tired, Emily dressing for work with quiet focus, Emily smiling politely instead of warmly. And he had noticed every change but chose silence because silence felt safer than conflict, and as he flipped through the pages he understood that his mistake was not lack of love but lack of courage, because he had believed love would survive without being spoken, that presence was enough, that time would take care of things, and now time had done the opposite, it had created space, and Daniel grabbed the notebook, opening to a blank page, his hand moving before doubt could stop him, writing faster than he ever had, words pouring out without planning, admitting fears he never said out loud, admitting he missed her voice even when she was near, admitting he felt invisible in his own marriage, admitting he still wanted her not out of habit but out of real desire, and the writing felt urgent, like if he slowed down the feeling would vanish, and as he wrote he stood up, pacing the room, still writing, ink pressing hard into paper, because this was not poetry or apology, it was truth, raw and simple, the kind he avoided for years, and memories hit him fast, their first apartment in Seattle, the nights they talked until sunrise, the promises made without thinking, the belief that love would always feel the same, and he realized how quietly they had drifted from that version of themselves, not through anger or betrayal but through comfort, and the thought hurt more than a fight ever could, and suddenly his phone vibrated on the desk, breaking the rhythm, his heart jumping as he saw Emily's name, and for a second he just stared, afraid to answer, afraid she would hear the truth in his voice, afraid he would ruin the moment he was building inside himself. And when the call dropped before he could decide, the silence returned heavier than before, but this time it felt different, clearer, and Daniel knew then that writing was not enough, hiding letters in a drawer was not love, it was fear disguised as patience, and he closed the notebook slowly, standing still, breathing hard, realizing that this weekend was asking more of him than reflection, it was demanding action, because love unspoken had brought them here, and only love shown could take them somewhere else. And as he looked around the study, at the life he had built carefully but quietly, Daniel made a choice that scared him more than silence ever had. Morning arrived without mercy, sunlight pushing through the blinds like a reminder that thinking time was over, and Daniel did not allow himself to slow down because hesitation had already taken enough from him. He showered quickly, dressed with purpose, and stepped outside feeling exposed but determined, driving through familiar streets with a new sense of urgency, his thoughts sharp and focused, knowing that if he stopped to doubt himself he would lose the courage he had just found, and his first stop was the small flower shop near downtown, a place Emily once loved but they stopped visiting years ago, and he chose flowers carefully, not the safe kind he always bought, but something brighter, something bold, something that said effort, and the florist smiled as if she sensed this mattered, and Daniel nodded without explaining. Then he drove to the old music store where a local pianist still played on weekends, the same man who once played at their engagement party, and Daniel spoke fast, explaining only what was needed, asking for a favor that felt risky but right, and when the man agreed, Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, like hope taking shape, and from there he went to the lakeside cafe where he and Emily once sat for hours talking about dreams. That felt too big to fail. The owner recognized him, surprised, and Daniel asked if the place could stay open late. Just once, and again, without much explanation, kindness met him halfway, and by the time afternoon settled in, Daniel returned home exhausted but alive, moving through the house with focus, cleaning, rearranging, opening windows, letting air and light into spaces that had felt closed for too long, and he played music softly, not to impress but to remember, choosing songs that held meaning, songs from road trips, from slow dances in the kitchen, from moments when love was loud and easy, and doubt tried to creep in, telling him this was foolish, telling him Emily might not feel the same, telling him he should protect himself from disappointment, but he ignored it because fear had already cost him enough, and as evening came closer, he set the table simply, no excess, no performance, just intention, and he wrote one final letter, shorter than the others, clearer. Written not to explain the past but to invite the future, admitting he had been quiet when he should have been present, steady when he should have been expressive, loving but afraid to show it fully, and when the letter was done he sat down, hands clasped, heart racing, waiting, listening to every sound outside, every passing car, every shift in the house, and time stretched painfully, each minute heavier than the last, and he wondered if Emily would understand, if she would feel seen or pressured. If this effort would heal or simply highlight the distance between them, and as night fell the lights outside flickered on, shadows moving gently across the walls, and Daniel stayed seated, refusing to distract himself, because this waiting was part of it, facing uncertainty without retreat, and when he finally heard tires on the driveway earlier than expected, his breath caught, fear and hope colliding in his chest, and he stood slowly, steadying himself, knowing that whatever happened next would not be undone. Because for the first time in years he had chosen honesty over safety, action over silence. And as the door handle turned, Daniel realized that love was no longer something he could think about quietly, it was something he had to live out loud. Emily's car stopped in the driveway much earlier than Daniel expected, and the sound alone made his heart jump as if it already knew this moment mattered, and when the front door opened she stepped inside slowly, travel bag still on her shoulder. Eyes scanning the room with confusion and caution, noticing the soft lights, the changed air, the music playing low, and Daniel stood near the living room, not smiling yet, not moving toward her, giving her space because he knew this was not about rushing, and she asked quietly why she was home early, explaining that the visit felt unfinished, that something had pulled her back, and Daniel listened without interrupting, realizing how long it had been since he truly listened without planning his reply, and when she finally stopped speaking, he handed her the letter with both hands, his voice steady but honest as he asked her to read it before saying anything, and Emily hesitated, then unfolded the paper, reading slowly, her face changing line by line as years of quiet effort, fear, and love reached her in clear words, and as she read Daniel watched closely, seeing surprise soften into understanding, then into emotion she had not shown him in a long time, and she sat down without looking up, holding the letter like something fragile, and when she finally met his eyes they were filled with tears that did not accuse but recognized, and she admitted she had felt lonely even while married, that she missed feeling chosen, missed feeling wanted instead of expected, and Daniel nodded because denial no longer served him, and he told her he had been afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of conflict, afraid of discovering he was not enough, and she told him that silence had hurt more than honesty ever could, and the room felt full not of tension but release, as if both had been holding their breath for years and could finally exhale, and they talked fast now, words overlapping. Memories resurfacing, moments misunderstood finally explained, not blaming but uncovering, and Daniel admitted he had mistaken stability for effort, presence for connection, and Emily admitted she had pulled back without explaining her pain, hoping he would notice, and when he didn't, she learned to protect herself by expecting less, and the truth settled between them, heavy but necessary. And instead of pulling away they sat closer, not touching at first, just sharing the same space honestly. And Daniel apologized without defending himself, not dramatically, just clearly, and Emily accepted not because it fixed everything but because it was real, and outside the night deepened, the house quiet again but no longer empty, and Daniel told her about the places he went that day, not as proof but as intention, explaining he wanted to fight for what they had before it faded completely. And Emily listened carefully, then said she didn't need grand gestures, she needed consistency, openness, and courage, and Daniel agreed, promising not perfection but effort, not silence but conversation, and slowly Emily rested her head on his shoulder, a simple movement that felt bigger than words, and Daniel felt the weight of her trust return gently, not all at once, but enough to hold, and they stayed like that for a long time, not rushing to fix the future, just choosing each other in the present, and Daniel realized that what he did when Mom wasn't home was not about planning or proving love. It was about finally showing up emotionally, choosing honesty over comfort, and learning that love survives not because it is quiet, but because it is brave enough to be spoken.